Why steel erecting?
There's just not enough steel erectors out there.
What was the best advice she got?
I would rather look stupid than be broke.
It's okay to be wrong, right?
Tell me about the future.
Oklahoma City specifically is growing.
How are you attracting the right talent for your company?
One of the first benefits I saw was like, man, anywhere, I'll always have a job.
What made you to say, whoa, there's a niche in this specific trade?
It's crazy how much things have changed in ironworking, and it's also crazy how much they haven't.
What are some of the things you're seeing out there?
Safety is taking a big turn. Half the guys owned a harness. Nobody uses that anymore.
Welcome to Beers with Contractors.
All right, Terry, my man, we are back in studio. How are you doing, sir?
Doing great. Beautiful
Cool.
afternoon. Straight on.
So, Terry, I was thinking about this. You know, I was at World of Concrete, right?
You were?
And I was speaking with an Australian brick mason from Melbourne, Australia. It's crazy. I'm thinking, wait a minute, you came all the way here for World of Concrete. And, of course, I could listen to him talk all day because it's just had a cool accent. But he's got this technology he's testing out called Laymaster, which is essentially a wristwatch that you wear that tracks the units of brick or block that you're laying in a given day. And they said it is nuts, the technology, because they've tried to trick it just by swinging their arms. You ever do that when you're trying to close an exercise ring?
Yep.
It's like, maybe if I just sit here and swing my arm around, it'll close the exercise ring. But it is cool to think because it'll GPS track if you're mixing mortar, whether you're not laying brick. And I think it goes out to market later this year. I know you get to kind of see some new technology there at the universities. But, I mean, is there anything new on the market in the crazy world of your academia?
Well, I sat through an event this morning looking at up-and-coming technology, and as fast as AI's advancing, I mean, it's already affecting our industry. It is just going to continue to affect it and change the way we do business in so many different ways that we're not even realizing yet. And AI is advancing not only in its development, but it's reducing its cost.
Yeah.
And so it's going to become exceptionally prevalent. And then in terms of Oklahoma City and biotech engineering and manufacturing, stuff like that, there's some really interesting companies moving into the space. So there's a lot of projects, it seems like, that are going to kick off here in the Oklahoma City area. It's going to be good for contractors, good for suppliers for quite a while coming.
Yeah, well, not to mention, like, just the technology around safety, you know? I mean, growing up, it was like, all right, kid, get up on the roof. It's like, you really want me to do that? It's like 7-year-old kid up on the roof, you know? But now they've got all these crazy little harnessing systems and stuff. And, of course, at World of Concrete, there was AI-driven analytics for, you know, monitoring your kind of your health during the job, like heart rate, body temperature, things like that. So if you're in a high-stress environment, oxygen levels, just to make sure, like, hey, by the way, like, as you're working in this world, you know, it can track and give alerts if you have employees out there that could be, you know, on the verge of a heat stroke, because how we've had that happen in our business. It's crazy. So, but yeah, I'm excited. I think it's cool. I'm interested to hear from our folks in Australia who are now listeners of the show, which is kind of cool.
International.
Yeah, and it's weird. We would listen to this show on a Thursday, but they're listening to it on a Friday at the exact same time because they're a day ahead of us. So it's kind of been a weird scheduling thing. But yeah, hey, listen, I am excited about our guest today because, Terry, this is one of your students.
It is.
And it shows that I know I give you a lot of shit, Terry, but we've had several of your students on. We've had some of your trusted cohorts on as well. And even though I like to pull your leg a little bit and tease you, man, you're spitting out tons of great guys. So there's my compliment to you because there's jabs coming probably from the guests today as well.
Most likely.
But, boy, I got to tell you, everybody, we're going to bring out the high school boys in Terry and I today because of the trade that we are representing. Our guest today is the owner of Foster and Geer Structural. They are specializing in commercial contracting that is only around structural steel and steel erectors. So after leaving OSU OKC with Terry in 2016, he actually created this business. He was in the ironworking fields. way before OSU OKC. And then after getting himself hurt, he dusted himself off, went back into school, got back on the job, and then finally got the itch to say, you know what? I'm not getting any younger. I'm going to start my own business. And I love these stories because I know there's so many talented people out there that can generate wealth and well-being for so many people. So our guest today, Dan Geer of Foster and Geer Structural. Dan, welcome to the show, buddy. Cheers
Thank
to
you for
you,
having
sir.
me. Good to meet you, Will.
All right,
Good
so
to see you, Terry.
Good to see
we're
you,
going
bud.
to go ahead and get our gigglies out because, to be clear, everybody loves giggling around about steel erectors, right?
Yeah,
So
the erection process is fun to joke about.
I bet if you have an HR department, I bet it's just nuts to even say, all right, guys, rule number 1 in the handbook,
Yeah.
we don't make erection jokes around here.
Yeah.
But my father did that years ago. Blake metal erectors or steel erectors. And in high school, they were the most popular shirt in the year 2000. Everybody wanted these shirts.
Yeah, I
Of course.
imagine so.
So, but no, it's cool. So I know I gave a very abbreviated version, but yeah, take us through the history. And I love to hear about this entrepreneurial journey that you went on that said, hey, I'm going to start doing this. So let's start back as long as you can remember.
Well, I started ironworking just to pick up some extra cash in high school. You know, my stepdad, he's been an ironworker since the 70s, and my uncle was an ironworker, and it was just a good way to make some extra cash. And I really, really never saw it being a long-term gig. And I believe it or not, I really tried to avoid it. And then, you know, I started kind of doing it as after school and summer, spring break, anytime I could just make some cash. And then I went to school for music, and that did not make me very much money. And so when that kind of fizzled out, I ended up, you know, really hating music, and I decided I want to do that more of a passion and as a career choice. The job was waiting for me. I kind of toyed with whether or not I was going to stick with it. You know, maybe I'll do this for a little while. And, you know, I just kept getting some pay raises, and I got a little more comfortable. And I actually, eventually, after a few years, once I got good at it, I'd come to realize I kind of liked it. It was, you know, something new every day. I saw, you know, different parts of the state, and, you know, I wasn't on the same job more than a couple months at a time. So by the time it started to get old, you know, I was on to the next thing. And to this day, that's still something that I really enjoy about it, is you're always meeting new people. You're always seeing new things and new challenges. Let's see. And then fast forward to 2020, everything shut down, and, you know, everybody kind of took kind of a reset. And shortly after that, me and my partner, Josh Foster, you know, we went to the West Coast, and the Navy was doing a bunch of work out there. And we took that on and learned a lot out there. And after a few years of doing that, we decided it was time to come back home. I came home first, and when I got back, I called Josh and I said, you know, there's really not a whole lot of guys doing what we're doing. You know, like, there's a big market here. He said, yeah, I've been kind of thinking about getting home too, so let's put something together. And it started over lunch, and he went back to finish up the jobs out there, and I stayed here and started putting a plan together. And I didn't have it all figured out, but, you know, we're still doing that, still figuring it out.
Well, I don't think anyone in business has it all figured out ever, right?
Yeah, learning that too.
Yeah. I mean, they're continually improving the process and refining their business. But, I mean, you went from working in the industry, making a living, having a good career, to saying, hey, I'm going to leap into ownership. I mean, what was the scariest part of making that, like, jump from working for someone and getting a steady paycheck to being like, all right, that paycheck's dependent on me now?
You know, I don't know that there was one single moment like that. It was kind of stretched out over the whole process. You know, I just kind of, you know, the best way to eat the elephant is one bite at a time. You know, I just started off with what I knew I could do. And then I called people. I have a lot of mentors that I, you know, reached out to and just said, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. What is something I need to know? where should I start? Who should I call? Who should I, after I get off the phone with you, what's my next call? And I just kind of just traveled that path. I did what, I found out that there's a lot of people, once I started this, that wanted to see me succeed.
Yep.
And once that kind of became apparent, I just kind of trusted it, and I just kept doing what, the next right move.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that's important to bring up because my expectation is there's a lot of young people out there who are contemplating like stepping out on their own and doing their own thing, and they don't know who to talk to, and they're afraid to bring that conversation up. Will, I mean, my expectation is if someone came up and talked to you and had questions, you'd spend as long as it took to make sure they knew what they needed, right?
Oh yeah,
Yes.
the goal is to just talk their head off to where they never come back and bother you again. They I mean honestly, successful people love to share information because that's typically what got them to where they are.
Yeah.
Is there was people there, and I love that you mentioned this, Dan, because I think somebody told me years ago, said every billionaire and bum have the access to the same information now with these little technology boxes that we carry around, right? It's just how you're using the information. So picking up the phone and just calling people, and I think people were drawn to like ChatGPT or the internet or something like that when it's like, that's not going to give you the real world, right?
Yeah.
So it is cool to hear that. And interestingly so, with you calling all those mentors, what was the best and worst advice you got from those mentors? I'd love to hear, and please mention names so we may know. No, don't do that. But so because you're obviously just taking in as much advice, surely you've had a moment to reflect and be like, oh yeah, that was spot on, or that wasn't as much.
Without getting too specific, I kind of had it in my head that there was a certain way that this was done. That being the, getting the job, acquiring the jobs, bidding the jobs, writing proposals, all this. So I asked a bunch of different people, what do you do in this situation? What do you do if this client's asking you this? And I took it all as gospel when really everybody had a different answer, and that's how they do it. And it's not necessarily what was going to work for me. There's a good friend of mine that he does some metal work. He doesn't focus strictly on erection, but, I ask his advice a lot, and I realize that he's not doing what I'm trying to do. So what he tells me really won't work for me all the time, and so, like I said, without being too specific, I think that was the first thing that I realized is there's no golden answer here.
Yeah.
There's no one size fits all approach.
And the other part of that is, and Will, what I've seen is that often it doesn't matter, like you always want to be in a position where you're not the smartest person in the room, right? So there's always something to learn from someone. And it's either going to be how they got successful or how they got to where they did. Or you can look at it and be like, well, that's what they're doing and they're not successful and they're not doing what I want to do. Let me move in the other direction, right? You can always learn from success, but you can also learn from not failure, but from people who haven't been successful.
Yeah. Well, in my younger days, somebody finally had the wherewithal to tell me, listen, you got to be cautious of who you surround yourselves with, right? And that was on a personal level. But I say the same goes for the business level as well. And the good news is even my friends and business associates, we disagree on stuff all the time. But it's cool because we get to collaborate. And that's what's interesting. I had another question here, Dan. You know how to do the work, right? Like you can sweat your butt off out there. You know how to put the buildings together, all that. So
He can
what
get
was
it
that
up.
weird? What's that, Terry?
I know he can work an erection. Yeah, he can work that erection process.
Except on cold days, it's really tough. But so, I mean, when you had to make that transition over, Dan, what was that like? Because I know you were good at doing the work, right? But then you had to transition out.
Are you asking like what were the challenges I was facing as far as moving into a different role?
Yeah. Yeah. What were some of the hurdles that you experienced making that transition of being the guy that can do the work to the guy that has to be over the work?
Well, a lot of it is, I would say, my approach with other individuals. As an iron worker, we get a reputation of not being easy to deal with. There's a lot of confrontation and a lot of, you have to be very upfront with the things that you're trying to accomplish in the field. Whereas from a business standpoint, it doesn't always work like that. You have to develop these relationships. And I was worried about it. I'm not going to say that I couldn't do it. It's something I was like, man, I can't come in here acting like an iron worker, knocking things over and,
Well, you can.
and getting in fights, and so I really worried that, all right, and then maybe I overdid it and I was too nice at times. It was just dealing with these interpersonal relationships that you build and, balancing, not being taken advantage of, but also being able to work with people. Mm-hmm. And so it was kind of a mind shift like that, but we're still figuring that out.
Well, how many HR complaints do you have, Terry, at OSU?
There's a file. It's big and it's thick. But no, what you're talking about is true. You're coming from the field and you're coming from a segment of the industry that is, you have to be upfront. You have to get it done because the way you're working and what you're working with. And you're flipping to, you're going to have to be the owner now. You're going to have to work with designers, architects, and owners. And that's a whole different world.
Yeah, it's a whole different world. And I guess another way to say it is I don't have a sales background or a marketing background. I show up and I'm there to do a job. And that's what I've been doing for the last 20 years is showing up and getting it accomplished by any means necessary. And that's not always the best approach when trying to foster these new relationships and build this new clientele.
So, Dan, you mentioned something before. I want to go back from where you and your partner moved back from the West Coast. And I love this because we see contractors after contractors after contractors. They just want to over-diversify. Obviously, you came from that business, but what made you to say, whoa, there is a niche here in this specific trade, and there's a gold mine waiting? Because I think those are all around us, and people forget that. And then when things go slow, they start to over-diversify. And I think it was super smart that you did that. But why steel erecting?
This episode is sponsored by Performance, the bonus system designed to increase profits for your construction company. Performance incentivizes your production team for more efficient installs and rewards them when they beat your preset labor goals. So no more milking the clock and no more unnecessary gas station trips. Performance drives your team to work harder and smarter. Every construction company on Performance has seen a 7% decrease in direct labor costs or more. Click the link in the description or visit performance.co to schedule your demo today. That's PER, MANCE.co. Reward your team, retain your team, grow your profits.
Well, primarily it's because that's what I know. That's what I'm good at. That's what I've always done. So, logically it was the next step. Also, is when I came back, there wasn't anybody really doing it here in town. There's a couple other guys that, I would consider competition, if you will, but a lot of the work that I'm trying to pick up has been taken from out of town companies, people from Dallas and Houston and Denver and, these guys. And it's like, there's no way that they can be cheaper paying these guys to come here, build this, bring all their equipment, ship their manpower, get hotel rooms, flights, all this, and the work's in my backyard. And there's, and a lot of these guys I know, it's like, I can do it just as well, but I have guys here in Oklahoma City calling me for work. Like, why can't we make this thing work?
Yeah. Well, but also, I think one thing that I hear out of that is there was still competition in the market. Mm-hmm. Just no local provider that people needed to champion the market. Am I hearing that correctly, Dan?
Yeah. There's competition, but not nearly enough to worry me that I shouldn't do it. There's just not enough steel erectors out there to scare me off. Yeah. There's room for everybody here.
Yeah, and there's a lot of projects that are hitting the ground, that are coming up, and you understand what that need is. And you're just a local boy being able to fill that need.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I don't care if you're in business to business sales, people will purchase. That relationship's there. It's awesome. So I love to hear that, especially because, there's, my EOS implementer, which if you need to hear about EOS, Jonathan Nielsen was on a very early episode. You go look him up, but he says there's riches in the niches, right? And it's like, man, if you can focus on one thing, way better, you will dominate that market with enough time and effort and patience. So Dan, on that note, most people, they're curious about this, and you decided to partner in on this business. So how's that relationship work? How did you structure it? And why did you choose to go partnership rather than solo? What part of the job are you that bad at that you needed a partner, Dan?
I wouldn't
I'm
say
just
I'm
kidding.
bad at it, but Josh he has a large skill set that a lot of people don't have. And first of all, his work ethic and his drive are unmatched. I mean, this guy loves hanging iron. He's been there since day one. Since I started hanging iron, he was there. We've traveled across the country together. It's somebody that I trust, and, and a lot of people trust him. And we fight all the time. We argue about everything you could argue about. But really, I couldn't see doing it without him. I don't think I could do this by myself. He's out there running the jobs. He's, some of the first work we got was in Laredo, Texas, and I couldn't just continue to build what we're building and also be in Laredo at the same time. I can't just send anybody out there. Had to be somebody that I trust. He's really the only person that I would trust with what we're trying to do. And also, he's the only one that seems to be on the same page and sees it. He's the only one that sees the same vision that I see about becoming this erector, representing the Oklahoma City area market, and nobody else really seems to want to do it anyway. So it was the clear choice there.
Well, and Dan, what you've highlighted, and you said it multiple times, I mean, you've worked with him out in the field, right? And there's a work relationship where you're trusting someone when you're doing dangerous activities.
Oh,
but Will, you work with your wife, right, in business. I work with mine.
Sometimes we work well together.
But I mean, all joking aside, that is someone that you can trust to make the right decision.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And that's why you see so many family-owned businesses is, well, first off, and I don't know if this is this way with you, Dan, when you first started, but it's like typically really good friends and family will work for pennies on the dollar to see the vision accomplished, right? And, you mentioned, Dan, you guys started working with your dad, right? Same here. Like, I thought, man, I'm picking up shingles on a job site at age 7 for $4 a week. I am killing it.
Yeah.
I was getting ripped off, and I was probably subject to some child labor laws. But
I doubt there's any labor laws in North Carolina at that point in time, right?
no, there wasn't. But I have that dynamic a little bit where, like, still there's a maturity in business that it happens where eventually the decision has to fall somewhere and somebody's steering the ship. So for example, one of my businesses, I own most of the shares, right? But the decision is held with another individual. If it's that strong enough that I feel like I need to supersede it, I will. But operationally, somebody is steering the ship, right? And that's where I see partnerships are a great way to enter business. And I don't know why the correlation doesn't move this way. I know a lot of people, I think partnerships, sorry, I'm monologuing here, Dan and Terry. Partnerships, I think, get a bad rap because there's so many stigmas around, well, partnerships fail, right? But well-structured partnerships actually succeed really well. And it translates over into like, well, Terry, you know this. It's cheaper to live as a couple in a house or apartment or whatever the case is than it is for someone to live solo, right? Because those expenses and the workload and everything in the household is shared, right? And the same goes for business. I mean, there is a definite need for marketing and sales, and there's a definite need for operations and getting the work done. And when you have partnerships that have different skill sets, I think it's a secret sauce to a lot of businesses. So, I mean, sorry for getting all long-winded on that, but I love to hear this about your dynamic mix with your partner. Go ahead, Dan.
And that's kind of how we have it structured now is he handles field operations and I handle more the administrative and and business aspects of it. And especially now being so new, a lot of bleed over with both roles. But, you know, you had mentioned that partnerships get a bad rap because they fail. Well, who's to say that they wouldn't have failed if they were not partnerships? Maybe it's just a bad business. You know, that may have nothing to do with it, the fact that it's a partnership, you know, so.
Yeah. Great point.
Dan, you know, so you've been in this for a little less than, 12 months, right?
Yep.
So in all those months of experience right now, if you had to look back and tell another young contractor who's looking at making that same step, what would you say? Watch out for this, be ready for that. What information would you give to them?
I would say go out immediately. Day one, go out and start meeting people. Let them know who you are. Knock down doors. Start making the phone calls. Don't wait until it's all figured out, which is, I didn't want to look stupid. Oh, we started, and they asked me a question. I don't know how to answer it. And then I look dumb. It's like, well, you know, I'm going to look dumb if I don't have any work or, you know, nobody knows who I am. So that's what I would say. You know, in the beginning, I watched probably too many, you know, YouTubes on how to get in. I got the bid platforms and all the stuff that, you know, I tried to shortcut it when really ended up just making those phone calls and doing all the legwork myself anyway. I just did it later than if I would have started in the beginning doing that.
Yeah.
Well, and I think will testify to this. I mean, Will, I'm sure you look stupid in business every few days.
Hey, man, I love it. Hey, there is a bell curve, and maybe we should make a case study where, like, you know, and a lot of this is with your ego, like, where it's like, I'm afraid to look stupid, to where it's like, the more stupid I look, the more I love it, man. Because it's like, it's your intention behind it.
Yeah, I would rather look stupid than be broke. So
yeah. Oh, that's great. I love it.
That's
if
a
I gotta
shirt
look stupid
right
to
there,
figure it
Will.
out.
Oh, dude, I'd rather look stupid than be broke. Right there. That's why contractors kick ass.
I mean, you talk about humility, right? And it's that idea. And one of the biggest things I think I've learned is it's okay to be wrong, right? If you learn from that mistake, that's just an education. If you continue to make that mistake, you're an idiot. But
well, hold on, Terry. Don't point me out directly to our 5 listeners, okay?
It could be any one of the 3 of us on this call right now.
Oh, man. You know, I love that, though. But so, you know, obviously, back to the starting the business, you know, you had to have some doubters. And sometimes we are our own worst enemy. You know, we become our own doubters. So, Dan, what kind of advice do you have that people are like, you shouldn't do this, it's too risky? You know, tell me about that journey.
You know, I got to say, I didn't experience a whole lot of that. A lot of people, when I said what I was going to do, they said, yeah, that makes sense. I had a lot of support and a lot of people rooting for me. But I got to say, if I had come up to people giving me doubts, it wouldn't have mattered. Just go for it anyway. I've been doing it too long, and I've overcome too many things out in the field to where I was like, okay, what's the worst that happens here? I lose some money. You know, like there's nothing too bad that could have happened that I haven't already experienced. I've been broke before. I've failed before. This couldn't be any worse, you know, so.
It's that idea that I have failed, I have been broke, I've hit bottom,
yeah, still here.
and I got back up. So why not just do it again?
Yeah.
Right? Why not try?
Yeah.
Well, Terry, I wish you had this freedom at your facility, but I was literally having this conversation with a contractor, I think in either New York or New Jersey this last week, where they know, like my employees know, I will burn this building to the ground and rebuild it from scratch, metaphorically. Yeah, sorry. Metaphorically, censorship overlords out there listening to my words.
I'm thinking about the insurance company. That's all I'm thinking about.
Yeah. But they know, like, hey, if I go bust, like, I'll literally go hop in the pickup truck. My brother and I talk about it. Like, dude, we'll go back to doing framing. Like, we'll just start framing again. It'll be easy, even though we're both old.
Yeah. I mean, that's the other thing is, like, worst comes to worst, like,
Yep.
Me and Josh, we have jobs anywhere we go. We could call anybody in our contacts and we'd have jobs. When we first started, that's when I started reaching out to people that we worked with in the past. A lot of times they're offering us jobs. They say, oh, you started a company. It's almost like, oh, that's cute. You guys got your own little company there. That's neat. Why don't you come with me? Like, well, I'm not calling you looking for a job. I'm telling you, I have a company now. We're here. So that.
It's like, I'm a big boy and I got my big boy pants on.
Yeah. Oh, that's
Yeah.
nice. Oh, you got your little old insurance there.
Aw. Well, that's a good. I asked about. We haven't talked about the haters yet, but that was more about the doubters. It sounds like there's some of them.
But that, that also kind of bleeds into, in one of the conversations we had, Dan, was looking at like social media and branding and how I'm obviously rocking your company's
Yeah,
koozie,
and last
right?
episode too.
Nice.
But I mean, what kind of evolution or education did you get on like putting yourself out there like that? Because my expectation is, as an iron worker, you weren't overly concerned about your social media account.
No. And I'll be honest, I'm still not terribly concerned, but we are, I'm trying to get that ironed out.
Haha, zinger, good pun. There we go. Yeah.
But I did find that, like, for instance, I had done some work with a client. I picked up a little job with them, and I think it was just their way of kind of testing out the waters with this new erector in town. And I did the work. Everything went fine without a hitch. We kind of talked on the phone quite a bit, sent some emails, got the work done. I went to pick up the check, and I met the owner of the company. They were having their Christmas party, and I said, hey, by the way, I've sent in a ton of bids with you guys, and I'm not hearing anything back. And he said, well, who are you guys? Where'd you come from? And I said, well, I gave him the story of who we were and what we've done. He said, oh, you're those guys. Oh, I know you. And that kind of, that was what really sparked, oh, well, maybe it's not all about price all the time. Maybe because he told me that I was actually underbidding what they were looking for. And, I was leaving money on the table, but they didn't take my bids because they didn't know who I was. And that was a real eye opener there.
So back to your specific trade, I think somebody outside looking in would view it as kind of like it's the same thing over and over and over again. But what are some of the innovations you guys have seen, Dan, and especially on the steel structure side? Because I see some of this through the International Building Show, World of Concrete, and things like that, that there's some cool stuff. But what are some of the things you're seeing out there?
It's crazy how much things have changed in ironworking, and it's also crazy how much they haven't. You're still picking up big beams with a crane, using metal chokers, and, it's still a really dangerous job. But when I had first started, I think half the guys owned a harness, and nobody wore them ever,
Crazy.
And we always operated on what's called subpart R, which is, it's an OSHA thing that gives kind of some leeway to iron workers when it comes to safety and tying off. And there's some exceptions that are made in subpart R, but it's really vague and it's really overused. And a lot of people use that to get out of, safety
wearing their
requirements.
harness.
But nobody uses that anymore. If you come on a job today and you say, don't worry, I'm an iron worker, we go by subpart R, they'll say, get off my job. Like, don't even say subpart R anymore. So safety is huge. I mean, and that's something that Josh would say years ago. He'd say, if you want to keep building pole barns and working on these ragtag jobs, don't tie off. But if you want to work with a legitimate company and you want to make money and you want to be successful, you're going to tie off on my job. And safety is paramount anywhere you go now. And that wasn't the case. And like I said earlier, I met Terry going to school because I fell on a job and got seriously injured. And I thought, I'm out of a career now. So,
Yeah.
I would say that obviously safety is taking a big turn in the last 10, 15 years.
Well, that's a great segue because, we find that, and studies have shown through some great organizations, that Gen Zs are not applying to schools or trade jobs because they view it as unsafe. And to hear kind of that message about safety, a lot of contractors, we view it as hokey, but it really important, not only to the culture of your company, but for people to even consider applying for you. And
Yeah.
that's my segue here, Dan, is, with your business and you've come from it, how are you attracting the right talent for your company? Obviously, there's tons of inappropriate jokes around your trade. You just used the word choker, partly a few from sentences around erectors and erections. I mean, all joking aside. Like, how are you finding talent out there in the world, and what's that game looking like for you guys?
Well, you had mentioned earlier that this younger generation gets a bad rap of being lazy and on their phone, blah, blah, blah. And maybe so, but I think that could be the same could be said for any generation. I mean, I know plenty of old lazy people that are on their phone too much.
Yeah, Terry, get off your phone.
Busted. But the younger guys that I've met, they take it serious and they realize that there's nobody else their age doing this. And I think they kind of get the gravity of the fact that they're going to be the ones doing this in the future, and that they really are at the threshold of something great. And they're few and far between, but those young guys are out there. And going back to safety, we drill it in their heads like this is dangerous shit, and you can get hurt, you can die doing this. We're not messing around. We're going to take this serious. And I think that starting off young, realizing that they don't develop those bad habits that these older guys, that if you give me a 40-year-old iron worker who's been walking iron for 20 years plus, and you ask him to tie off, you're going to get a lot more resistance than a 19-year-old kid that is scared to death to walk iron anyways. So he'll say, yes, sir, I'll tie off immediately.
Well, one thing you just brought up, and I was talking to a group of young people yesterday, the kids that realize that, hey, if I go and become an electrician, a plumber, an iron worker, HVAC tech, and that's my career choice at 18 years old, I'm always going to have a job. I have young people who realize that is job security. It might not be with the same company. It might not be in the same location, but they're always going to have a job.
Yeah.
And for them at that age to have that realization that I can go into the trades and be successful and be financially secure, that was an eye-opening experience and a conversation to have with them.
Yeah, and it was starting to become that way when I became an iron worker. I was, after a couple of years of doing it, and I built up my skills, and I learned to weld and rigging, and I got comfortable, and I knew what I was doing. That was one of the first benefits I saw. I was like, man, anywhere, I'll always have a job. And I had a lot of friends just, getting out of college with, degrees that they may have been making a little bit more at that time, but the career path really kind of plateaued. A few years later, I had no problem finding work. I had offers on my table all the time, and their market was flooded. And that was 20 years ago, and that's the case even more.
Well, with specifically your industry, Dan, I wanted to ask about kind of the fluctuations. And we all look around, sometimes you see doom and gloom on the internet about inflation and all this stuff, but it would appear to me that the commercial market has been incredibly strong and it's expanding. Is that what you're seeing, kind of boots on the ground there from what you do day to day? And do you see that getting better, worse? Tell me about the future.
Well, Oklahoma City right now, I think, everybody's new budgets come in at the beginning of the year. And so like my inbox is just full of stuff to bid on. So I think that Oklahoma City right now is about to experience more growth than I've seen in a long time. I couldn't speak for all markets, but I know Oklahoma City specifically is seeing some real growth. And I imagine in the rest of the country too, because I do get calls from, Arizona and Nevada and all these other places, Arkansas. We took a job in Arkansas. I get a lot of stuff going up in Rogers and Fayetteville area.
Oh, yeah.
Texas, so I imagine it's pretty similar in the rest of the country, but Oklahoma City specifically is growing.
Well, Will, I was at an event today and they said for the first time we have more people from Texas moving into the state of Oklahoma than from the state of Oklahoma moving down to Texas. They've changed that trend that's been historic, losing people to the state of Texas. We're growing. I think we're in top 20 cities in terms of growth nationwide.
Yeah, it's kind of that. It's a wild transition to see because call it 8 years ago it was maybe 29th, 30th, but now it's breaking top 20 in growth rates. But I think we're starting to see that movement across the country where people are migrating to these, what I would consider boutique markets that are not mega cities. They still have all the things that people want, but it's not like we have to travel an hour through gridlock traffic to get to. And not only here, we're seeing this in Buffalo, New York. We're seeing it in parts of Milwaukee. We're seeing it in, heck, even parts of Birmingham, Alabama, which is a big city already in itself, a little over 1 million people. So it's wild to see the growth in these markets. So, hey, before we get to our final question, Dan, which I'm going to let Terry tee you up because he taught you and we'll see how good you did. I got to hear some of the best puns or jokes around your trade. I know you've heard them all. I know you've had some silly ones thrown your way. I know you probably had some young bucks that started working with you and they're like, by the way, trades guys are the worst and the best for coming up with some good puns. So I got to hear some of these from the steel erectors trade.
Man, that's...
Somebody may pick up on these and get good branding.
Yeah. Well, the welders are always talking about burning hot and getting deep penetration, but deep penetration is not what the erection's all about. It's more than just deep penetration for the erection.
Well, so, okay, good. I'm glad I'm not alone because we do a lot of joint sealing on concrete. And we talk a lot about
see where this is going. Yeah.
And those come in sausage tubes. There's a lot of mentioning of sausage and caulk. And Terry, thanks for the guest today because this is the one that gets us canceled. There you go.
The fact that our industry makes these terms and labels our products in this way, somewhere along the line, someone's going to chuckle at this one. I know it.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's okay. It's good branding. You can throw that stuff. Actually, there's a company that was in Northern Virginia when I lived there, and I loved their branding because their vans were covered with these little jokey slogans that other contractors typically lean into, like voted #1 by the owner and his mom was on one of the vans. And then there was another van, and I loved it when I saw this van. And this could be a good one for you, Dan. It said 80% of what we build is still standing. And all it was doing was they were just kind of making fun of the whole, bolsterous, over kind of exerted marketing efforts of saying that you're the best, you're the best, you're the best.
We have we have a friend of ours who's involved in wastewater or porta-john, stuff like that. And it's like #1 and #2. Right?
Yeah.
He wants to be #1 in the #2 business, right?
Yeah, that's right, man. It works. And there's no shortage of that sense of humor in the trades.
No, there is not. So
well, cool. Well, Terry, I will let you tee Dan up for the good finale question.
Well, Dan, we love to ask our guests this question, and it comes from understanding Will and his many failures. But is there a time that you have failed so significantly bad that you can now look back at it and be like, I'm kind of proud of it, and I learned a lesson?
It's hard to pick out one specific. There was a time where, and it didn't turn out to be like I said, I'm still here, but I went around and I was measuring out for edge angle for deck, and I was considering, for some reason in my head, I had 10 inches as a foot. I don't know if I was trying to use the metric system or what, but I welded miles of this edge angle on at 10 inches when it was supposed to be a foot. And, with deep penetration, it's hard to break those welds loose. It took about 3 days of fixing it.
Man.
Of kind of an all hands on deck.
How do you even remove those? Like, you can't just take a little grinder.
No, you got to take a big grinder. And you have to grind for hours, days.
Like they say, you might not be a good welder, but you'll make a heck of a grinder.
Yeah.
Well, Dan, I appreciate your time today. Hey, how do people get a hold of you? And I love this that you started with the show today talking about you had people to call. You had people to reach out to for mentorship and things like that. I am such a proponent and I think it's one of the ingredients that helps save the trades is getting people that are already in the trades to expand and innovate the market by starting their own businesses. So how do people get a hold of you and Josh if they have, questions, things like that?
Probably the easiest way is go to our website, fosterandgear.com.
Yeah, gear as in G-E-E-R, right?
Geer.
Oh,
yeah.
G-E-E-R. G-E-E-R, sorry.
Yeah. And there's a big red contact button, and hit that, it goes right to my email. And we're pretty quick to respond.
We'll be sure to spam contact that pretty well. And Dan, I appreciate what you're doing for the trades. I'm proud of you and your partner for taking this
Thank you,
leap.
Will.
I appreciate you tolerating our bad jokes today, Terry. We were actually pretty calm. Pre-show, I was a little worried. I was like, this is going to be just an hour-long, pun fest. But
We are professionals. We are professionals, Will.
yeah,
We did it. We made it through.
you got a button up today. So yeah, you did bring the professionalism. But cool. Well, it's all you other tradies out there. We appreciate you guys this week. We're looking forward to, we got a huge roster of shows already being booked and starting to build our backlog back up. So we will be all over the place the next few weeks. But also, I think I'm going to have to radio in from a spray foam conference in Daytona, Florida coming up. So I'm looking forward to that. But if you get a chance, like, subscribe, visit our store. Obviously, our Contractor Kick-Ass gear is on sale there and benefits our Construct Mine Future Camp. And we will see you guys next week. Thanks so much.
See ya.
Thanks, guys.
And that's a wrap for today's episode of Beers with Contractors. We hope you enjoyed our chat as much as we did. Before we say our final goodbyes, a friendly reminder. Beers with Contractors encourages responsible drinking. If you choose to enjoy a beverage during our time together, please do so in moderation and only if you're of legal drinking age in your country or state. Furthermore, the advice and insights shared in this podcast are for informational purposes only. Always consult with professionals and experts in your field, and be sure to follow local laws and regulations regarding licensing and permits. We're here to help, entertain, and inspire, but your safety and compliance are important. So, as you head out into the world of construction and contracting, remember to build responsibly and make decisions that stand the test of time. Thanks for joining us today. We'll catch you on the next episode of Beers with Contractors. Until then, cheers to your success.